So thank you so much all for being here. What a wonderful crowd. I'm Ann Preston, and I'm just so excited to be here. She mentioned some things about me personally, and you can see I am a working woman who is also pregnant, so this conversation is especially interesting to me, as I'm sure it is to all of us. By the way, 30 weeks today. I feel like I've just entered the phase where I went from belly button to kind of belly thimble. It's starting to pop out. So that's the stage I'm at right now. But just so excited to be talking about this today. And the discussion is all going to be focused, as you know, on this scorecard. And to tell us a little bit more about how we got to this place, we have Anna Beth Gorman, the Executive Director of the Women's Foundation of Arkansas, to tell us a little bit more about the scorecard.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for being here. My name is Anna Beth Gorman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. I joined the foundation in spring of 2016, and this idea was born probably in early spring of 2017. I hadn't probably been with the organization a year, and I actually sat down with Sharon Vogelpohl, and we were talking about, you know, the strategic direction of the WFA and what is going to be the thing that sets us apart as a foundation that's really benefiting women in Arkansas. And we really talked about, as a foundation, yes, we're philanthropic, but we want to provide resources and tools. And what is a resource and tool that we can provide that's, you know, sets us apart, that's different? And so we kind of had this idea about creating something that businesses could use to measure gender equity. And at the time, you know, gender equity, and it's the word equity, is often confused with a lot of other things. And so we, in this discussion, we were struggling with it. And so that's when I thought, you know, like I was going to apply for a Clinton School team to work with us on this project. And so it came to pass that we simultaneously had a Clinton School team, and we also invested in a research report that came out in March of this year, Economic Indicators for Women in Arkansas across the state, region, and county. And it provided us with a lot of information about the current status of women, and really bringing to light that, you know, we've got women working in our state. We've got 53% of our workforce are women. And so we do need to do something that is enabling businesses to have conversations about how do all employees succeed. And so that's really where the scorecard was born. And we're very proud that it came out. The Clinton School presented it to us in April, and we've been spending the last several months on how are we going to roll it out effectively, who are we going to use to help us understand like how we refine it and make it a little bit better, and that's, I think, what we're going to really talk about today with the people that are on this panel with me. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, a great overview, and thank you, Annabeth. And she mentioned 53% of the workforce are women, but when they were doing additional research, they also established that, you know, women are not making what men are making. Some of the numbers are really kind of surprising to hear, but white women in Arkansas making 78 cents on the dollar, Asian women making 74 cents on the dollar to men, African American women making 66 cents, and Latino and Hispanic women making almost half of what their white male counterparts are making. So this conversation definitely important, and we're so excited that each of our panelists here today, their companies has taken part in already taking this scorecard. So at this time, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about what they thought about taking the scorecard. So would you like to start?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm Sharon Talek Vogelpohl. I'm a principal and president of Mangan Holcomb Partners and Team SI, communications firms based here in Little Rock. And we took the scorecard, and we're anxious to tell you a little bit more about our experience. And as Annabeth said, kind of was involved at the ground floor of that, so excited to see so many people interested in it and here today.
Hi there, I'm Madeline Moore. I'm the Human Resources Manager at Arvest Central Arkansas. Also really pleased to be here today and able to participate.
And I'm Chris Bond. I am the publisher for Business Special Publications at Arkansas Business, and we're really excited to have taken this and also to find some ways to help keep the conversation and momentum moving forward from this study.
I guess you need the mic.
We'll keep it, we'll keep it. And you guys can see the picture over there. That's a look at what the actual scorecard looks like. I printed out a hard copy of it. So, you know, it's not too many pages, but it's really good. There's some yes or no questions, and you get a point for if you answer yes. And it's not a gotcha kind of thing. It's just something to start the conversation and have employees know where they stand, have these businesses know where they stand, so they can kind of say, okay, what can we be proud of what we're doing, and what can we maybe be doing better? So with that said, let's talk a little bit about the experience of taking this gender equity scorecard. And Sharon, I'll start with you and just wondering, what do you think the value for your business is in taking this?
Absolutely. So we're in the talent business. So we sell time and intellectual property, and so recruiting the best workforce is really non-negotiable for us. And creating an environment in a competitive space like communication, and particularly in digital communication, is really at the forefront of what we're thinking, because it's what we sell. So creating an environment where we can attract the brightest and best is very, very important to us. And this is just one dimension of creating that environment vis-a-vis the other things that we look at. And so finding the opportunities to recruit. Communications has a lot of representation of women, particularly in entry-level positions, but not dissimilar to many others. The further you get up the line, the representation tends to dissipate. And that's something that we're real excited that we're trying to stem at our own firm, but also what we can learn to make that even better.
Wonderful. And yeah, Madeline, let's talk about the value that your company saw.
Absolutely. So for us, I sat down with my boss, who's the president and CEO, and it was just a great conversation starter for us. It really opened a dialogue. I'm a young working mother myself, so sometimes it's a little difficult even for me to breach those topics that can feel personal, but this was really just a great place to start the conversation, to establish a baseline for ourselves, to acknowledge what we're doing well and talk about what we can be doing better. We really identified that there's lots of low-hanging fruit. For example, financial literacy for us was a big one. We're a financial organization and we give it to our customers all day long, but sometimes we forget to do the same with our associates. So it was a great exercise.
Madeline, I wonder, in your conversations then with your boss, did you guys come up with anything meaningful then that you might be able to implement?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as I referenced, there's some low-hanging fruit for us. There's some programs we already have that we provide to customers, and we just need to establish a forum and a practice of providing those to our associates. So there were many things that came out of that.
And that'll be really helpful, I think, for other companies too, that are then, it gets them thinking. It gets, okay, what can we do to improve upon where we're at?
Absolutely, absolutely. We had some good dialogue even in the back about that. It seems like strengths for some or weaknesses for others, so you can establish those community partners as well.
Thank you. Chris, how about you and the value?
Yeah, I think for us at Arkansas Business Publishing Group, historically, gender equity has been part of our DNA. Our owner, Olivia Farrell, was one of the driving forces behind establishing the Women's Foundation of Arkansas, and she's always encouraging us to look forward and to think how we can be better. And so as we took the scorecard, there were areas that you can sit back and kind of pat yourself on the back and say, okay, great. Half of our exec team female, 60% of our workforce female, 60% of our management team. But the real value is to look at that scorecard and say, oh, okay, we've done really well historically, but here, to keep it moving forward, here are ways that we can be better, and here are some real meaningful steps that we can take. And then the value for us internally, we have conversations about it, but then also, as Madeline just alluded to back in the back before we came out, being able to talk to our peers across the state of Arkansas and find out what they're doing well and how we can mirror that.
Yeah, really just starting the conversation, and that's what's important about it. I wonder if you guys could give me specific notable takeaways that you took from taking this scorecard. And Chris, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. I mentioned to you guys some of the areas where we felt like we were doing really well, just in terms of percentages of workforce and leadership. We have some financial training and literacy that we've done for years within the organization. But when we got to, there's a section on mentoring, and when we got there and we scored a 0 out of all the possible points, that hits you pretty hard. And I was telling these folks back there, we have mentoring that's happening ongoing every day. I'm a product of that within our company. But the fact that we don't have any sort of established program for that, we recognize the value, and as soon as we took that and realized how far we have to go, we immediately made that a priority. So when our retreat committee meets later this week, they've been tasked with how do you work mentoring into the retreat, and how do we do this going forward?
And I just will jump in. You mentioned mentoring. I'll go through some of the categories that are in this scorecard just so we get a kind of an understanding of what was this based on. Financial literacy, flexibility, that was a big one. How much flexibility do you have in the workday? Can you work on weekends? Can you work after hours? Things like that. Job skills, leadership, mentoring, and resources. And just quickly, Annabeth, you came up with that through your research?
Actually, Mariella might have spoken about this before we stepped out. So the Clinton School team, they had a great survey. We had over 500 participants in an online survey. They conducted focus groups. They did interviews with key players. And so really, these are what women in Central Arkansas told us that they are looking for in the work environment. And then they were weighted by the WFA board and some other people on really like how to measure this. And so that's where they came about. But what was interesting for us is that financial literacy was on there in an equitable workplace. And that was, I think, a big aha in the research the team did, and then for us as an organization, because we're concerned about economic equity. And the majority of respondents were educated professional women in the workforce, and so that was also interesting. When we put out this survey, that's who responded. And a huge ask is we'd like our companies to be providing us financial literacy. We're providing income for our family as well, and we're not getting the coaching we need to be managers of our own finances. And again, that's I don't want to steal Madeline's thunder, but that when I visited with Arvest, again, 80% of a bank's employees are female, and they are providing services to the public. And again, you got to look for that low-hanging fruit. But these categories are actually based on what women reported they're looking. And I want to stress too but these categories are beneficial to all employees, not just women. This is, it's a gender equity, so we surveyed women, but all of these categories you could go through, and if you've got men in your company as well, that benefits them as well. So it's really benefits the entire company, and we're really proud of that. But that's a little bit of the background of where that came from.
Thank you. Yeah, of course, when women succeed, men succeed, the company succeeds, everybody's succeeding. So that's the goal probably of any organization. Well, Madeline, she was just mentioning financial literacy. I know you touched on that at one point as well, but maybe you could talk about the specific takeaways that you guys got from the scorecard.
Absolutely. So that was definitely one. And like I said, that's an easy one for us, which is nice to kind of have an easy. But there were really a lot of things, and I'll try to reference a few just throughout all the categories where we answered yes, but we would like that to be a more enthusiastic yes. We would like to really feel like we're doing absolutely everything we can to contribute to that. I think another huge takeaway for me was just, it's great for an HR manager and a CEO to have a conversation in an office. It's great for all of us to engage at that level, but what are we doing to take that conversation outside to share that? We sometimes in our organization, we're constantly inviting feedback from associates, so we don't want to create survey fatigue, but we tried to get creative about ways that we can have these more targeted conversations where you really get pretty granular with it, a little bit of what we talked about. So, for example, some of the questions were related to childcare and things like that. And we decided it's great to have that conversation, but maybe that's not the right thing for our organization right now to have its own childcare facility. But nevertheless, how can we acknowledge that that's a barrier that many women and many families frankly face, and what other ways can we look to address that? So lots of valuable takeaways, but I think what I'll continue to think on is how we spread that message and encourage our associates to feel comfortable communicating about these important topics.
Yeah, you mentioned childcare a lot. There's a lot of questions that ranged in the flexibility category. That was very important to the women that I know you surveyed that wanted this to be a part of the scorecard. Things like, and it's something top of my mind, but a lot of them are dealing with maternity and paternity care. Things that, and think about your own organization. Does your organization offer breastfeeding rooms or lactation stations? Well, that might not be something that every organization thinks about doing, but nonetheless, it's a real need for a working mother. I mean, any working mother in here knows that, right? I'm seeing you nod your head. So that's something that if your organization is thinking about that, then maybe you feel more valued at that organization and everything is going to go better. You're going to be more productive and it's good for everybody. Sharon, could you talk about what you took away as well?
Absolutely. I'm going to echo a little bit of Chris, because I also was the beneficiary of a very productive mentoring relationship from very early on in my career that actually started as an internship, and it was with the president of the company, so my predecessor. That was 25 years ago, and it was very informal, and it was very productive for me. But one of the things that I started to think about is how critical it is to formalize those mentorship relationships and have the ability for everyone to have access and have some facilitation. Not everybody has the same personality types, and the idea of going in when you're 21 years old, forming a bond with the president of your company is not for everybody, and we've got to make sure that that access is there and that it is facilitated in not a way that makes it disingenuous, but in a way that makes it accessible and gives everyone the same access. Annabeth referenced one of the things that we talk about quite a bit. There's a substantial difference between the word equity and the term equality. And so that's one of the things that we really hope to bring to light, and again, to start those conversations in how we can create a more equitable environment and give a helping hand to those who need it, to give them the same access to those sorts of opportunities. And the formalization also translates into pay equity, and promotion rates is another area. I felt 1,000% in a good place in terms of where we ranked there, but the idea, again, it's the simple step of formalizing that and reviewing it with regularity that will be a place that we can improve and make sure, particularly as we grow, that that level of commitment to that is in place and is formalized in some way.
Well, you answered my question. Yeah, it's about, these questions get you thinking, but then what do you do about it? And formalizing it is necessary, because mentorship, like you said, can be a casual thing sometimes. Oh, he's my mentor. But do you actually have time set aside to have mentorship meetings that you're going to get a chance to sit down and really connect and check in? Where do we go from here? Okay, let's talk about, I know that some organizations might be out there thinking, ooh, well, I might be scared to take this. I don't know if I want to know where I fall. Is it good? Is it bad? But this is really just a conversation starter. It's not to judge you. It would never be published anywhere. At least it wouldn't be published at this time. This is just to start the conversation. So what would you say to somebody out there that they take this scorecard? Why would they want to do this? I'll start with you, Madeline.
First, Annabeth promised me I don't think our number's going to be published on the internet anywhere. So that took some of the pressure off.
She just tweeted it.
Oh, no. Oh, no. But really, it's a baseline. It's just a baseline, it allows you to come to a tangible result about something that can seem really subjective at times and difficult to quantify. Some of the questions deal specifically with the percentages of women at each level of the organization. And for me, I love that because, I think we'd all answer, do you work for an equitable workplace? We'd all say, sure, I wouldn't work there. But numbers don't lie, and they really tell a story. Our organization also has an affirmative action program because we're FDIC insured. So I get to look at numbers all the time of where we stand in minority representation, women, veterans, and it's always really insightful to just understand from the numbers where potential barriers are and to really be able to to make some concrete plans from there on how you'll address those issues.
And I'll just have Annabeth talk a little bit more about, right now, the scoring situation, where it is. There eventually, this is still in beta testing, but eventually there might be something where it says, okay, if you fall into this range, you're doing pretty good. But we don't exactly know where that falls yet. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what we're looking for right now is we're looking for partners. We're looking for companies like the individuals at this table who are taking it and can provide us feedback so we can refine it. Because, for example, I represent a nonprofit of 3 staff. I mean, we have a very small capacity. I told all them, like, if we took this test for our own organization, we would, if there were grades, we would fail. I mean, because we don't have the capacity. So what we're asking is to share it back with us. What were some of the things that you saw, like, this didn't fit because X, Y, and Z. For example, the size of your company, like how many employees do you have? I mean, again, equity is about recognizing barriers by certain people. So in groups, and so a small business versus a large business versus nonprofit versus for-profit, there are variations that we have to acknowledge so we can refine this tool and make it a tool that's applicable to your type of business. And so right now, what we're inviting people to join us in this, take it, and it's designed, I think we might have mentioned this, it's designed for 1 to 2 key employees to take. It's not designed to hand out as a survey to every single employee. It's really, it's the decision makers, it's the CEOs, it's the HR, it's really people who understand kind of the company structure, benefit packages, what's being offered, and then we'd like to have an informal conversation with you about, okay, so tell us what you found, and Ben's going to talk about this a little bit later, but we're developing a partnership with Arkansas Business on how to kind of acknowledge businesses that are participating in this.
Thank you. Yeah, that helps a lot. And Chris, I know you have relationships with many other organizations and friends at other businesses out there. What would you tell them if they came to you and said, why should I take this scorecard?
Well, we've all heard various stats. I think we could walk into any organization that's represented out in the audience today or across the state, and we could say women earn $9,000 to $10,000 less than the men in your organization. Arkansas, in terms of gender equity, ranks in the bottom 10 in some stats and the bottom 2 in other stats. And I think people would say, oh gosh, we got to change that. Okay, now what? This is the now what. This gives you the roadmap of here are areas where you can improve, here are steps that you can take, and then the peer part of that, the peer relationships of being able to benchmark against what other companies your size are doing, what other companies outside of your industry are doing. I think that's very beneficial, so I would absolutely encourage people to take this to help improve our state.
And what could you add to that, Sharon?
I think Annabeth referenced that 53% of the workforce in the state of Arkansas is women, and if you look at the degree earning statistics that are coming out that are most recent, the pace at which women are earning higher degrees is outpacing that of men. And so if you really think about what the workforce of the future is going to look like, and if the predominance of that is going to be women that you're going to want to attract to your organization, creating an environment that is appealing to them and satisfies their needs to make sure you get the best and brightest is going to be really, really important, not only today, but even more so in the future. Also, another interesting, I don't have the exact statistic, Chris probably has it written down, he has every other statistic written down, which I love him for, is the idea that there's been a lot of research that has borne out that organizations, even large organizations that have representation that is representative of the community at large, and that women are represented in leadership positions, by and large, fare better than those that do not. So it makes dollars and cents as well in terms of making sure that you have that workplace so you can have the right mix of folks to lead your organization.
And Sharon, I'll just stick with you for a moment. After taking this assessment, and we've alluded to this a little bit, but what do you think the businesses can do to improve equity, maybe even your own? I know you've mentioned that, but as a whole here. And how do they really measure that progress and growth? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. How do we see where we're at now and where we are going to be in a year from now?
I think that's what makes the scorecard such an innovative approach. And to my knowledge, this is the first one in the U.S., at least, that we can see so far with our peer organizations in other states. So we're really excited about that and having the opportunity to take the lead, because alluding back to the conversation that precipitated a lot of this that Ann and Beth and I had, I said, I want to have, as a leader in my organization and being in a position to create this environment, I want to know I'm doing well, but you need to tell me what I need to be doing. And if I'm not, you need to help me understand what the things are that I need to be doing and provide me resources to help lead my organization in that direction. And as she and I talked about, what greater calling for the Women's Foundation of Arkansas than to be the catalyst to precipitate the conversation and then also to provide those resources. I think you alluded to the fact that the scorecard is in and of itself a benchmarking mechanism and a process by which you can make improvements and watch your score go up. So we're really excited about it in terms of not only what it presents for Arkansas to take a leadership position in this based on where we are right now, but also how it might translate to other states and be a benefit as well nationwide.
It is exciting to be on the leading edge of that, first of its kind, Arkansas, making headlines hopefully for all the right reasons. Chris or Madeline, would you like to add anything about how these businesses might be able to measure their progress?
I don't think either of us really want to follow Sharon, but I'll grab the mic and see what we can do here. No, I mean, she said it really well. I think just, again, putting tools out there and knowing that this is a starting place. I know when I left my boss's office that day, I had a whole page of scribbled notes about, okay, next do this. And, there's one question that comes to mind that referenced resource groups. And I'm a little bit embarrassed as a human resources professional, but I needed to see the footnote on that one and learn a little bit more. So again, I had lots of takeaways. I plan to develop an action plan that really allows us to track our progress and hold ourselves accountable. And it's just a great tool. I can't wait to keep talking about it.
Great. You good? You want to say anything?
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add, just outside of the thing that we really like about this is the opportunity to compare yourself and with your peers, see where you can get better. And then I would encourage people to take it, and I don't know what the plan for this is, so maybe I'm stepping out on a limb here, but take it annually, benchmark yourself on a regular basis so that for Arkansas Business, when we implement our formal mentorship program, we can come back a year from now, 2 years from now and say, okay, we have made meaningful progress here. So I think that's the real value here, is just being able to go back and gauge your progress.
And we mentioned, the top executives are taking this, but it shouldn't just be limited. This discussion should be open to the wider group, I'm sure. So I just want to ask you guys, what do you think about those employees who might not be in a leadership role? How can they be a part of this? How can they be a part of this discussion and improving gender equity in that particular workplace? Would you like to start, Chris?
Sure. So I know this is about employees, but I want to turn it back on those of us who are sitting up here today and our peers in leadership in companies across Arkansas. First thing you've got to have is an environment where your employees feel engaged and feel like they can have these conversations with you and where they feel like they're being listened to. So I think that's number one. You've got to make sure that's a crucial part of your DNA and the environment of your office culture. And then for employees, make sure that you're going to your leadership and pointing out where you can be better. If you don't have an organization where you feel like your voice can be heard, where you can just walk into the CEO's office, find someone within the organization that you know has her or his ear and go to them and have them advocate for you and for your fellow employees to make your workplace better.
What would you say to that, Madeline? How can others get involved in this process?
Absolutely. And I'd have to echo Chris pretty heavily on that, because I think although we want employees to feel free to speak about that, I think you have to have that culture created. I practiced law for a short time before coming to Arvest, and I'll never forget taking my 2-month-old up to the office one Sunday afternoon and had her playing on a blanket, and several partners walked by and said, what are you doing up here on a Sunday? Why do you have your kid here? And that's kind of the point, right? It was a Sunday afternoon, and there are 5 law partners that have been practicing 30 plus years that are at the office. So you have to have a culture that establishes that for everybody, that it's okay to have some balance, and it's okay to want to have a family and a work life. So I think a lot of that really falls to the employer. But for employees, what I plan to do is find meaningful ways to interject these specific questions to kind of give that conversation starter so we can really dive into some of these barriers.
And Sharon, as the principal and president at your organization, I imagine you would hope that everybody felt comfortable on every level getting involved. And so what would you say, maybe at your particular organization or others, how they could be a part of this?
Absolutely, and you guys kind of covered the front end of the process in terms of input, and I think for this to be really viable long-term, what I would say to the people within the organization is please avail yourselves of these opportunities, because if we are creating them, seeing people take advantage of them, progress, and we're all successful together, because I don't want to have a party that nobody comes to, right? So if the mentoring room or the resource room is always empty and people aren't participating, that sends a signal to me that that isn't something that we need. And so hopefully they can get engaged and participate in those things, and everyone can be successful together.
Perfect. What I want to do now, unless you wanted to add anything else, Annabeth.
I'll just say really quickly on, so you asked them about measuring progress and growth, and for the WFA, what we're committed to doing is when we are refining this is creating an additional toolkit, not just the scorecard, but learning from the businesses that have taken this. So for example, if Arkansas business is scoring really well on mentoring, or if that's Arvest, can we include that example as a best practice for other businesses? That's really, again, going back to the Sharon and I conversation, I highly encourage everyone to have conversations with Sharon about strategic planning, strategic learning, but then what? So what is next? And often we are contacted about resource groups, about mentoring programs, about how do you do pay equity. And so, what we hope to cultivate is really the best practices from Arkansas-based companies, so we can share that with other Arkansas-based companies, homegrown. I mean, our values are very similar in this state. No matter, I would say that transcends the size of your organization as well. So what we hope is that the toolkit that we ultimately create as we continue in this process is something that businesses can really contact and create peer networks on. Tell me about your mentorship program. Tell me about your pay equity measurement tool that you're using. And that becomes common language in our business community on how people are working together.
Yeah. Helping each other. We are in one community here, so it really does benefit us all. Okay, what I think I'd like to do now, you guys look like such a great audience, and I know you probably have some questions. No question is too big or too small, but while you're listening to this discussion, I'm sure you were thinking about some things, whether it's specifically about the scorecard itself, whether it's about how they came to this process, what's next. So I want to open it up to you guys for a few minutes now. If you have a question for any panelists specifically or in general, please just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you about what you're interested in hearing about. And we've got a microphone right over here, it looks like. Go ahead. Oh, okay, I thought you were I thought you were handing it to somebody. Yeah, I mean, it could be anything. I mean, are you thinking about, we have a question right over here. And if you'd like to, go ahead and introduce yourself first.
I'm Ruth Ann Hill. I'm with Arkansas Single Parent Scholarship Fund. This is very exciting. I'm wondering, of our three panelists that have taken this, and you're in rather large organizations, what is the hard plan for taking it from here? Because I hear, the HR, I have a big list of this, or how are you going to keep this from being the good idea that never happened? And what are you going to do in the way of structure within your organization? Is this going to go into performance goals? Is this going to go into a committee? What does it look like?
Sharon, did you want to talk about that?
So we're still in the early stages of interpreting what the self-assessment bore out for our organization and starting the process. There's some things, as I mentioned earlier, that are just quick check the box. It's like every year I want this done, and this done, and that can be implemented going into 19. Some of the things like formalizing the mentorship program is something that's going to take a little more resource and research, and Annabeth and I have already started talking about that in terms of what that looks like and what's the best way to introduce that into our organization and maybe be able to learn from some other participants in terms of how they've successfully implemented those things. I think it's just like anything else, it takes organizational will, but I think that as we grow the awareness of this program and get people comfortable with the fact, I think I can't overemphasize enough, you choose to take it, It's with the people you choose to make that evaluation, and you do what you choose with the information in the short term or the long term. And the only hope is that of those who participate in the cohort from a beta testing perspective, that they'll give us their anonymous data, because as most of you know, the more data you get into the pool, the better we can benchmark and then gauge our progress as a state, which is something that's very important here. So don't let it be a deterrent. Take it, just take one today, take a peek at it, and most of y'all will be able to go through, and some you'll say, yep, 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 and some nope, or that's easy, and that was really the process. It was not arduous at all. It was just something that got us thinking about it, and hopefully, I'll at least commit to you up here that we'll have some things implemented in 19.
Absolutely. And I'd like you to call me in 6 months if I can give you my card so you can help with the accountability piece for me. Because you're exactly right. You know, what doesn't get measured sometimes just doesn't get done, even though we've got great intentions. Other things arise, and particularly in my world, I've learned I better establish some concrete action items, and I better find a way to hold myself accountable. So I think absolutely that the annual review is wonderful, and I plan to establish probably, in our case, about 10 action items that we'd like to do this year as a result of this, and then measure that progress against our baseline, kind of establish some goals for where we'd like to be on those items.
Can you tell us, putting you on the spot, what some of those items are, those action items?
Let me peek back. So, you know, we actually did a pretty good job with our mentorship. Arvest as an organization has developed that within the last few years, but I would like, there's just a couple components of that we could formalize and make a little bit better, as particularly in measuring the success throughout that program. So having a sample size within our own organization about promotion rates among those who participate, I think would be a really great thing that we can do. Another, in that same category for mentoring, we're not just automatically assigning new associates to a mentor, and I think that could be a really great step, and again, some low-hanging fruit to assist associates to engage in that, because, you know, I think that you probably would find that probably more often than not, women are the ones to say, well, gosh, I just don't have time to engage in that also. So I think taking some steps like that initially to engage them in that program could be really helpful.
And you mentioned not automatically assigning, but I did notice that one of the questions under mentoring that I thought was interesting was, is there a consideration of gender, personality, career trajectory, or other characteristics when you pair a mentor and a mentee? And that probably is very important, because you have to have a good working relationship, and the chemistry to make that a successful mentorship.
Absolutely.
So something to think about, that maybe you think, okay, we've got a mentorship program, but how are we really approaching it? And so that's another great question that starts a whole nother conversation.
Definitely.
Chris?
Well, I'll just piggyback on the mentorship discussion, and that's one of those things. As of 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, I'll go into our retreat committee meeting and we'll start having conversations, and I just took this a week ago, so that shows you the immediate impact within our organization. There are other more long-term goals that we will establish and that we want people to hold us accountable for. And I have friends in this room. I have people that I deal with on a regular basis. I'm on video. And I know all of you guys will hold me and hold us accountable, and we welcome that.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to add, because Single Parent Scholarship Fund, there are some questions that relate specifically to an organization's commitment to tuition reimbursement, which I thought would be of interest to you. And one of the things that came up in a presentation Annabeth and I made a couple weeks ago was, there's a lot of organizations apparently that offer tuition reimbursement but don't offer reimbursement for professional certifications, like sitting for your CPA exam, or in my business there's the APR accreditation, accredited in public relations. Kristen was a beneficiary of that at our organization, and just that's the type of feedback that we're getting that's going to adjust some of the additional questions that we add. But I thought you'd appreciate that piece of the puzzle.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question back here first, since we're right there. We'll go there first. Please introduce yourself.
Happy Tuesday. I am Tracy Shine, representing the health and nutrition programs across the state of Arkansas. My question is, do you think outcomes will be different if viewed from the output of the employee?
So would the outcome be different if this was viewed from the employee's perspective? Good question.
If we're being honest, and we're being honest here, right? I think so. I mean, in my role, of course, as HR manager, my job is to know all the various benefits that we offer and to, publicize those. So I think certainly, I will be aware of things that some of our associates may not. And if we're failing them and they're not aware of those things, then we're really failing in that category. So I think definitely that would be eye-opening at a different level. And maybe this is a great introduction for an executive management team to take this first, and then after a little time to hand that down and make sure that you're really aligned there.
I know we've got several other questions, but if you guys wanted to add anything else, please feel free. Otherwise, we can go to the next question. You good? Okay, right here, I know you've been waiting.
Hi, everyone. Oh, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Star Haas. I'm one of the lucky Clinton School students that got to work on this project, and I specialize in women's empowerment, currently in politics on a nationwide scale. And throughout my studies, just in general, of women's empowerment and consistently pushing the ball forward to make things like gender equity happen, what I see being most effective is not only the organizations focusing on this issue internally, but they're also being an external way to report this. So I would love to see, an annual review that involves like the local news, local reporters, of course, the Women's Foundation that highlights, these are the organizations and this is what they scored. And then as the years go on, hopefully you can see their scores go up. I think that accountability on the external level is going to be very important in keeping this project in the spotlight like it needs to be. Thank you.
And what would you say to that, whether it be Annabeth, Sharon, Chris, anybody, if you think that's a great idea?
Well, one of the things at Arkansas Business that we are doing is we're planning to incorporate these results in our annual Arkansas Business of the Year awards. We are always celebrating companies that have financial success. We have an annual Business of Best Places to Work survey that we recognize people for having great stuff like ping pong tables and cookouts and happy hours. This is something to recognize this, I think, is even more meaningful than any of that. And so March 6th, with this year, the 2019 Arkansas Business of the Year awards, we will be recognizing those who scored high on the benchmark. So we're really excited about the opportunity to do that and to celebrate the companies who are getting it right.
Let's let that sink in for a minute. That's a big announcement. I mean, that's going to take this scorecard a long way. It's going to be recognized on that level. So I think it's really something to be noted and appreciative of that you guys are taking that step to include that in your award ceremony, which I know is such a coveted award. Did you want to add something?
One of the things that I would add, and I'm super excited about that, is I think where you were coming from was the idea that it would be almost reported like financials of a publicly traded company. And I think we need to be cautious in terms of that being potentially an Achilles heel. We don't want this to be a punitive type conversation. I think we want it to be people stepping up and setting an example, and hopefully others would follow. What I would not want to do is have a scenario by which people were fearful of this, if they felt like it was something that was going to be revealed, or if they're not comfortable quite yet. So I'm really excited about it being an opt-in scenario, and hopefully those companies that step up and start being recognized will set the example for others, and particularly when they start getting all the best employees, right? And they'll be, I need to be doing that, because we talked about that this is going to be hopefully long-term something that people purposefully look for in terms of an endorsement of an organization that's an environment that they want to be a part of. So when they're looking for jobs, they use that as a criteria. I think that's a long-term goal and a long-term vision we can all be excited about.
Great point. I mean, think about the unemployment rate right now being so low, so companies are competing for employees, and anything you can do to set yourself apart is going to be really helpful for the success of your company. What a great jobs environment we have. We've got a great man at the top working on that jobs environment, I might just add. making a jobs, my husband, Mike Preston, is making a jobs announcement right now in Bentonville. So excited about that as well. Did we have more questions? I thought I saw one over here.
Ruth Shepard, and right now I'm working with Arkansas Rep, and my mind was sort of skipping ahead in some ways, but I wonder if there's something in this survey that flexibility. You guys haven't talked about that a lot, and in most of the jobs that we have a lot of flexibility, but you know, the newscast has to go on, the print deadline has to be met, the teller has to be there when the bank is open, and so I'm wondering if in the survey there are some questions that would help us to understand. The show has to go on at the Rep, and so that would help us with being more creative in creating flexibility for our employees who sometimes someone has to be there.
Right. It's a very good point. And the flexibility questions are among the longest section of questions. I can go through some of them for you just really quickly. If you were you interested in hearing what they were? Is that what you're?
Well, I'm just wondering if they're going to plant some good seeds or some good ideas have already come up.
Please do.
One, because that's a great point, and frankly, that was our lowest score, and it's just because we're in the customer service industry, and you know, Arvest, even as a bank, has traditionally been attempted to be even more accessible with longer hours. So that's something we really want to provide, but you need that teller there when you need them there. So one of my favorite questions on that topic was whether the organization allows employees to trade shifts. And that's something that we're actually going to be able to do better than we've been able to in the past due to some new technology, you know, mobile access to time clocks and schedules and that sort of thing. So we're excited about that capability. And I do think there's many good questions that will help you get a little more creative about how to do that.
So the point is there are good questions in there that will help us all to figure out what we might do better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Annabeth might want to add that this is in flux. You may add additional questions as it goes on.
Absolutely. Well, and to that question, and I'm looking at some of the people that were part of our early surveys, there are so many nuances based on industry and organization, and you know, flexibility, culture, demands. But what's been really neat with just the agencies up here and some of the other ones that have already taken it is that it enables someone to have a conversation. You know, and so talking about being creative, it really, and I'm going to pick on Sharon now because Sharon, you know, like my company is the best in the world. I've got the best team, and I was at a program yesterday where they were recognizing Skip, who's like, we got the best team. You know, and you may think that you've got the best company, but when you work through something, it starts making you think a little bit differently. And so I loved when she shared with me her results. It's like, you know, well, there were things that we said no, but we've been doing that, so we're going to formalize that. And I think of some of the organizations that are talking about the struggles with flexibility, and flexibility is a word that's really interesting right now in our emerging workforce. You know, the value that our emerging workforce places on flexibility, and how families, men and women together, or families of however they're made up, are looking at, like, is this environment beneficial to our own family dynamic? And that value is very high now, you know, really looking at that. So it benefits organizations in Arkansas that want to be competitive in the long run to start having conversations about how can we be a flexible environment? Be you law firms, architecture firms, I mean professional firms, engineering firms. You know, we lose, Arkansas loses some of our brightest to our states around us because of what they're offering. If we're a state that can be more creative, and talking about that, and I think what's great about this, it's that it's allowing people to have a conversation, and it's getting our executives, our HR, to think about it in a way that isn't punitive. That's, you know, Sharon's word. It's a way that it's like, okay, these are the things that we're saying our employees are of value, and that's something now that companies have got to start thinking about, because we're going to continue to lose our great talent to other industries, to other states, if we don't have these critical conversations.
And today is the conversation about the conversation. I love it. Okay, we're almost out of time. It looks like we maybe have time for one more question over here.
Thank you. My name is Connie Foster, and I work in state government. I want to thank you guys so much for addressing this topic. I love your initiative and the whole scorecard project. I have a question for you. In state government, we often deal with budget constraints and things of that nature. And just this year, we implemented measurements of how we rate our employees and the incentive financially. Based on the scorecard information that you presented, what challenges do you see for state government compared to the private sector, or do you project or forecast that the outcomes will be close to the same?
Chris,
or measurable?
As someone who's probably covered what she's talking about, would you like to address that?
I would not.
Okay. It's a tough one. It's a good question to end on.
I will say that I think the size of your organization, sometimes change can be slow moving. That can be the case with state government as well. But I don't think you should let that stand in the way of having the conversations, because there may be, I mean, when we talk about flexibility, one of the questions here is flexible use of your lunch break. That's something that I think, and I don't want to speak for state government agencies, but I think that's something that could easily be addressed to help with flexibility in the workplace. And so I would say whether it's a government agency, a large multinational corporation with hundreds of thousands of employees, you still need to have the conversation and take a look. So encourage your executives to have those conversations, regardless of if it's government or private sector.
Would you like to have final thoughts, Annabeth?
So Connie, that's a great question, and I want to, as being an adopted Arkansan, I want to brag a little bit about how accessible our state government is and our leaders in our state government. And right now, the environment, even during an election season, is it's pro worker, pro getting a great workforce, pro business in Arkansas. And so I actually would say that I would project that we are going to have conversations with our state agencies. Again, Arkansas Economic Development Commission in the last legislative session introducing the fact of like women and minority-owned businesses. It's just not minority-owned now, it says women and minority-owned businesses. That was a huge step forward for our state. Again, our state leaders are very accessible, and they're looking for ways to make our workforce competitive. And today, you can be an advocate by going back to your office and sharing that with the person that has the ear to the next person. And so we've got a wonderful board of directors that has access to the individuals that can, make decisions and get in front of people. But it starts in this room too with being an advocate at a local level. But I'm very positive, and again, I'm a glass half full kind of person. But I do think too with the emerging partnership with Arkansas Business, if we can get more businesses to take part in this, and it becomes something that it is a standard that we want to see our businesses have, that, I think also our state government is like, well, we want to, how incredible that would be if the state of Arkansas actually had that designation on state agencies. That's when, our state becomes a leader in the nation.
Well, thank you guys all so much for being here. If you do have additional questions, they're very accessible. We were just talking about accessibility. Annabeth, very easy to reach out to, chat with her about it. Ryder Buttry over here, she might want to wave. And if you're interested, your organization, your business is interested in being a part of this scorecard, please reach out to them. Again, it's voluntary, it's anonymous, it's something that is going to just start to be a great part of the fabric of our community here, hopefully, in the years to come. So I just want to thank the panelists all for being here and for your willingness to be a part of this initiative. I can tell there's a lot of excitement both from you and in the room. I want to thank the Clinton School as well for being a part of this, and the Women's Foundation of Arkansas for really leading the charge in creating an equitable environment for everybody. So thank you all for being here.